Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Well, today we're going to look at verses 38 through 45, kind of a big bite, but I think it's important to get all this in because we're going to come to a Selah, and then we're going to have 3 more verses and come to another Selah. And then we'll end the week in 49 through 52. And that not only ends this psalm, but it also ends the third book in the Psalms. So we'll talk about that a little bit on Friday. So let's look today here at verses 38 through 45. And we have a change now. We have a shift. So now the question is going to be not... The declaration has been in the first half of the psalm through verse 37, God's faithfulness. He declares it, the psalmist declares it, he gives the reasons for it. He talks about Messiah and his coming and his reign and all that God's going to do for him and for his seed. But then we come to verse 38 and we begin with the adversative, but. So we ended with him telling us about David and Messiah's throne. It shall be established forever as the moon, as a faithful witness in heaven. And then he says, after the Selah, we thought about that over the night. Now we come today, but thou hast cast off and abhorred. Thou hast been wroth with thine anointed. Thou hast made void the covenant of thy servant. Thou hast profaned his crown by casting it to the ground. Thou hast broken down all his hedges. Thou hast brought his strongholds to ruin. All that pass by the way spoil him. He is a reproach to his neighbors. Thou hast set up the right hand of his adversaries. Thou hast made all his enemies to rejoice. Thou hast also turned the edge of his sword, and hast not made him to stand in the battle. Thou hast made his glory to cease, and cast his throne to the ground. The days of his youth hast thou shortened. Thou hast covered him with shame. So you see now, all of a sudden, God turns. Seemingly, he turns against his anointed. Not Messiah, but David. It says, but you've cast off and abhorred. Now that conjunction in the Hebrew there, that's translated but, is translated but because of the context. So we've seen the covenant established and faithfulness professed. Now the psalmist is speaking here. We've ended with the Lord's voice there in 37. The psalmist speaks, and it's almost like he's replying to the Lord's declaration. And he says, but you've cast us off and abhorred. You've been wroth with your anointed. Just look how often the word you is used there. Twice in 38. He uses it twice again in 39. He uses it twice again in 40. He uses it twice again in 42. He uses it once in 43, once in 44, and he uses it twice there in 45. So he continues to say, this is what you've done. So it's almost like the Lord has said, hey, I'm going to be faithful to this promise. And then the psalmist says, but you, pointing to the Lord, you've cast us off. You have abhorred us. And then he goes through this long litany here of all that's gone wrong. Torn down the hedges, brought his strongholds to ruin. He's been spoiled. Enemies are rejoicing over him. He's not made to stand in the battle, and so forth. His glory, you've made it to cease. Throne, you've cast it to the ground. And it was the throne that was going to be established like the sun. So now you understand it's not David that he's talking about over here in 36. It's Messiah. This is David. The glory of his throne is cast down to the ground. And the Lord's done that work. Why? Because he's been faithful. And you say, well, wait a minute. How can he be faithful if all this stuff has happened? And he just said that, it was going to be great and there's going to be peace and all the rest, mercy and truth and all that. Well, he's faithful because you'll remember what he said there in verse 30. If his children forsake my law, walk not in my judgments, if they break my statutes, keep not my commandments. So if they forsake the law, the judgments, the statutes, the commandments, then I will visit the transgressions with the rod. So the Lord is yet still being faithful. He's being faithful to his promise that if the children of David don't do and don't keep and don't walk in his commandments, then he's gonna chasten them. And here we have an example of it in 38 through 45. This is also the thing that he told Israel in general back in Deuteronomy chapter 28. If you don't keep my word, this is what's going to happen. All these curses will come upon you. So we come to another Selah. So we're going to break today. We're going to think about this. Come back tomorrow, and we're going to read a short passage, 46 through 48. So I hope you'll join me then here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.